Our team, we began to pray for you months ago, and we asked the Lord to call specific people by name to be here. So, not that that's any pressure, but we believe that you're here for a reason and that God has something for you. And we've made a few assumptions. One of them is that God has called some of you in this room to actually lead the team. And you might be thinking, well, that's not going to be me. I hope it's somebody else here. But we're praying that God will speak to you and call you. We only have an hour, so this is like the tip of the iceberg. But just remember that there is an iceberg, and there is lots more information and support and encouragement. But we hope that you will say yes. I deliberately, so my name's Donna Mitchell, I'm the National Director for Connecting Strains, and I deliberately brought a team to do this with me because we do everything in Connecting Strains by team. None of us would ever do this alone, but it's in team and we're willing to take bigger risks and steps of faith. So Connecting Strains is actually a division of Power to Change, the overarching organization, even over Breakforth, one. And we are the division that helps to equip the church, equip and mobilize the church to help societies marginalized know Jesus and experience his power to change the world. So we actually exist to serve you, the body. We want to give you all the support and resources and encouragement you need to answer God's call on your life and say yes to his invitation. But I want you to know that this is not actually a sales pitch. We started 13 years ago. We've been learning as we go forward, and we want to share what we've learned and equip you. So you'll get tools and ideas and first steps and next steps if you want to step out and start a team. There's no expectation for you to join us, but we hope that we can be a support to you. So let me pray, and we're going to just ask the Lord to speak to each one of you. The notes that you've received, I'll explain at the end. There's lots of information and contact numbers. There's blank note pages for you to take notes, and I left them blank on purpose so that you can write down the things that God speaks to you so that you can remember it. So let's pray together. Father, I thank you that you do know us by name. You know every hair on our head. You know where we have been walking, where we are in our journey, and you know your call in our life and the assignment. So I pray, Lord, that you would speak to each one of us where we're walking. Give us ears to hear, eyes to see what you want us to notice, and responsive hearts. Give us the courage to say yes. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. So Connecting Streams started 13 years ago, 12 years ago. We were seeking the Lord on how we could help the church reach out beyond the four walls. And we created a tool to help people share their faith. And we shared it with the local prison, actually in Fort Saskatchewan. We shared it with the chaplain, and he said to us, you know, the tool is great, but what we really need is people. And so we sent a first team. They didn't feel ready. They could have made a list of all the reasons why they shouldn't go and couldn't go. But they felt like God was calling them, so they said yes, and they went. And they were so transformed by the experience. And the women at that point were so hungry. It was like the Lord said, pay attention. And ever since then, the Lord has been adding to our team. So it started in prison, and then it was long-term care and seniors and widows and new Canadians. And when we stood back, we realized that all those people, what they have in common is that they're marginalized in some way from society. They feel maybe forgotten, in distress, powerless, in crisis. And that the Lord was calling us to help the body. taking intentional steps to reach out. And I want to just say that when I started Connecting Streams, I was a pastor at Sherwood Park Alliance in Sherwood Park, and then the Lord called me to birth Connecting Streams. And when I started, I was probably at the weakest point in my leadership. And I share that because some of you may be saying, well, this is actually not a good time in my life. You know, I've gone through some real brokenness and still recovering. It hasn't been a 6-month period of stress-free living. And but I just want to encourage you that sometimes God actually interrupts our life and calls us when we don't feel ready. In fact, we never feel ready for what God has in store for us. Over a period of time, the Lord gave us sort of 3 main foundational scriptures that I want to share with you that sort of undergird and just again explain His heart for the Lord. The first is a familiar passage from Isaiah 61, 1-3. And you'll maybe remember that in Luke 4, when Jesus got up in the synagogue and he quoted scripture, this was the passage he was quoting. He was basically explaining what his mission was. And it's our mission too. And he has shared that with all of us as his body. So the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon me, for the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to comfort the brokenhearted, and to proclaim that captives will be released and prisoners will be freed. He has sent me to tell those who mourn that the time of the Lord's favor has come, and with it, the day of God's anger against their enemies. To all who mourn in Israel, he will give a crown of beauty for ashes, a joyous blessing instead of mourning, festive praise instead of despair. In their righteousness, they will be like great oaks that the Lord has planted for his own glory. And then in Isaiah 58, and some of you may be familiar with that passage. It's too long, I won't read it, but basically it's a chapter that the people were calling out to God to act on their behalf. Would you heal us? Would you answer our prayers? Let us know that you're there. And he said, well, actually, you want me to act on your behalf, but I want you to act on my behalf. If you will give your life away, if you will spend your life helping others and helping the broken and the poor and those who need it, your own healing will come. I will answer your prayers. And it was almost like the Lord is saying, if you'll do what I ask, I will actually answer the very things that you're crying out for yourselves. And I share that because that's actually been the experience of Connecting Streams. As volunteers step out, their own healing has come. And then in Psalm 146, in Scripture it doesn't actually say marginalized, but the Lord gives an indication of, that he has a heart. He says he gives justice to the oppressed and food to the hungry. The Lord frees the prisoners. The Lord opens the eyes of the blind. The Lord lifts up those who are weighed down. The Lord loves the godly. The Lord protects the foreigners among us. He cares for the orphans and widows. And so we want to follow his heart. All of our teams go, and whether we're reaching out to all these various streams of people, we're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to create safe places where people can explore and discover and experience the love of God, where they feel safe and that they have dignity, and we want to share the good news. We want to share the gospel. There are many agencies that can do a lot of things to help, from resume writing to, helping with work and clothing and housing, but we felt like God was calling us to help the body share the good news about Jesus, because at the deepest level, all of us need him more than anything, and we need his power to even change our lives. So we've now grown to 5 streams, and we're going to show actually a video that gives an overview of all the different streams. You may be sitting there thinking, well, I have a heart and a burden for another people who are hurting, and so we can help you do that. The teammates are all going to introduce themselves, and then they each have a part to share.
To the prisoner who has learned to trust no one, to the homeless and those with addictions who believe they're of no value, to those in long-term care who feel they have no purpose, to the widow who feels lonely and forgotten, to the newcomer to Canada who has no assurance of their future. Connecting Streams volunteers take the good news of Jesus' power to give hope, meaning, value, purpose, and new life in Him. Connecting Streams equips and mobilizes the church to help society's marginalized know Jesus and experience His power to change the world. We fit volunteers to a team, help with venue clearance, and provide ongoing training. We help churches engage and broaden their outreach ministry. As staff, we support our teams in our own cities. And with our Link program, we can remotely support teams in any community. All this is to help fulfill the Great Commission, as societies marginalized and the church are transformed together by Jesus.
It's had a remarkable impact in my life, and I think that it's funny because I think the deepest impact that God has had in my life through this ministry, it actually kind of intersects with the deepest sin in my life. Which I think that deep-rooted sin for me is pride. And sometimes I think that it's what I'm going to do that's going to affect something, even for God's kingdom. And he's definitely been growing or crushing me down, I guess maybe more so, to a real humble dependence on Him. And you know, every other program they get in the prison is be better, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And there's no hope there. But in Christ, we have such hope. In the power of the Holy Spirit, we have such hope. I asked the boys how they felt knowing that Christ bore our sins to the cross and that He offers us His righteousness. And one of the boys, they had various responses, but the guy sitting to my right that night just said, grateful. One word, grateful. Right? These moments where you see the Holy Spirit breaking through.
Hello, my name is Sandy Tower, and I'm just going to ask you a question. What do you think a leader is? How would you answer that? I think of phrases like the big guy, or the big cheese, the boss man. I think the leader is the guy who knows stuff and gets things done. But I looked up, and in dictionary.com, the definition for a leader is a person or thing that holds a dominant or superior position within its field and is able to exercise a high degree of control or influence over others. That sounds scary. So, I think for many of us, when we hear that, it would make us just kind of want to run for the hills. For some people, though, they actually get excited and challenged and maybe even enjoy the title of that. But in my personal experience with leading various teams as well as coaching new leaders, I've come to a place where my required qualities of a leader are far different than the definition might suggest. The model of leadership I just want to discuss with you this morning is servant leadership. So just to back up a minute, if I were thinking of the most important quality I would look for in a volunteer or a team member, I would tell you that I would look for someone who has a posture of humility before God. Someone who has a strong realization that they desire to serve Him regardless of what they believe they are capable of or gifted in. I believe that when we are serving out of humbleness, we understand that we don't need to be the most gifted or the most knowledgeable, or as was stated earlier in the definition, control or influence others to a high degree. So this is a quote from the lead singer of Big Daddy Weep. I don't know if you guys have heard it. Mike Weaver. He says, real humility is just walking and realizing our need for God and agreeing with whatever He says about anything. And I just love that. The posture of humbleness is the same thing I look for in a potential leader. A leader is someone who is willing to humble themselves by serving their team. So I'm hedging a guess that you chose this workshop, I'm really guessing actually, today by being intrigued by the title, How Do I Start? And let me say this, you start by rejoicing in the common call of each person on your team to humble themselves and agree with God that we need to minister to the marginalized. How do we serve our team? We walk alongside them as we grow in confidence by each of us taking on small but important roles within a group. We encourage others as they join us in a journey to depend on God. We are leading people by sharing the load, not carrying the load. We show confidence in each member by giving them a purpose in being on the team. We are all the hands and feet of Jesus. None of us is a one-man show. We're all needed. Here are some simple steps we have for leaders of our teams for connecting strengths. So firstly, we pray for a posture of humility before God and your team. Secondly, we divide up responsibilities for the team, and you'd be coached through that process. Thirdly, we be in contact with our team on those roles weekly in order to allow them to prepare for upcoming ministry time. Fourth, we would encourage what is working well. Change roles around so everyone can grow in different parts. And lastly, we multiply when the team is strong and members are ready to do what you've just done with them. So, and Jesus modeled this posture before His Father. People watched and served with Him. And then He sent them out with others as they were ultimately filled and led by the Spirit. Scripture has the model. They weren't sent out alone, not lording over, not doing it in their own way or in their own strength.
Sorry,
Yes.
can you go through the steps again?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first most important thing I would say is to pray for a posture of humility before God and your team. Secondly, we want to divide up the responsibilities for the team, which is something we would coach you through. Okay? Then next, we'd be in contact with the team on those roles weekly so that everyone knows what to anticipate with the coming week. Then we would encourage what's working well when we kind of debrief with our team and change roles around so that everybody gets an opportunity to try the roles. And then the last is that we would multiply when the team is strong. So we would maybe find someone else in that group that could lead a new team. Because we want to multiply, right? We want to have many teams in facilities. Is that good?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so I'm just going to introduce the video that's coming up next. And it's dear to my heart. This young lady is, it's her personal testimony. She's one of our volunteers. And she stood out to me personally for her humbleness and her passion. And she would very much have considered herself a reluctant leader.
I have been a Christian probably 12 and a half years, but I feel like my journey really began probably just over 3 years ago when I started to feel really like God was calling me into something. My walk with Him was sort of lukewarm. So I started to pray about it, and I started to read in Matthew the portion that He talks about when I was hungry, you fed me, and when I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink, and so on. So I thought I'll take that literally and I'll just start by feeding people. So I went and tried to help out at the soup kitchen at our church. I went and I was only able to give a little bit of time during the afternoon so I could help prepare the food or whatever. I never really had any interaction with the people coming in. So I did that for a little while when I could, and I just really felt like work, which is fine, but I kind of was expecting that maybe there might be, you know, I would have a passion for something that God called me to. And I just wasn't feeling that. So I remember praying and telling God that I want to do something to serve you. And I don't know if I'm supposed to be passionate about it, or if I'm just supposed to go and do it. And it's okay that it feels hard and not like something that I want to do. One evening I was talking with a friend of mine, and I said to her, I feel like I want to get into the prisons. And I just want to go and visit people who feel like maybe they're forgotten. The interesting thing was also when I confessed that to her, I said I wanted to work with men. And that also was a hard thing to face because it seemed weird. It seemed like my natural path would be to go and minister to women, but somehow that wasn't what God was leading me to. So when I came home, I searched up prison ministry, and Connecting Streams came up right away. So I emailed them and met with Margaret shortly after that. And in having our conversation, she started to talk about leading Bible studies, and that scared me. That wasn't really what I was expecting to get into. I thought I was just going to go and visit people. At the end of the conversation, she said, do you ever see yourself leading? And I said, no. Like, I'm not, I know that about myself. I'm not a leader, so I'm fine following, but I'm not a leader. And she said, okay. She said, well, I just wanted to ask. So I went through the process of getting clearance and began going in at the orientation. When we went in, Bruce was leading the orientation, and he said, my vision is that each one of you will one day lead your own team. And I said to him, I don't want there to be any false expectations of what I'm here to do. I'm not a leader, and I don't really have any interest in doing that, but I just really want to volunteer and see what this is all about. So then when we started going in with Jamal, a couple times after we went in, probably the second or third time, he turned to me and he said, so you think you're ready to lead next time? And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know what, I'm not a leader. These people aren't picking up on. Why people keep telling me this. But I figured that it was a leading from God, so I said, I will give it a shot. And that was where I came alive. So God ended up taking me from something where I was willing to serve Him, but I wasn't passionate about it. It was just a commitment that I made to Him. And He not only gave me something, but He gave me something that I was already passionate about. I just didn't realize it. But I am so grateful and blessed to be doing this, to step out in something that I feel God has called me. He's equipped me. And now I don't say that I'm not a leader, because honestly, I'm really not, but I know that God is. And when He calls us to do something, He equips us to do it, whether we understand that or not. It has been just an exciting journey, and I look forward to what He's going to do next.
That was great. Like Jamal. We were trying to help Jamal find a wife years ago, and we said, what kind of wife do you want? He says, only a dog likes a bone. He was from a different culture. So brings me to my point. My name is Phil Taylor. This is my wife, Lorraine. And we started Welcome Home. It's a ministry to newcomers and refugees. And when Connecting Streams started, it was just women, right, in the beginning, and white, very white. And so our theme song when we started was my theme song anyway. They put up with it. I'm dreaming of a brown Christmas. And since then, we've seen the complexion of Connecting Streams change. And now we have men, young guys, we have women, we have the whole mixture, all the colors. A lot of People who are not white are a lot whiter than me, I noticed too. So newcomers are not here by accident. I feel sad for the Christians who are trying to get rid of them. You know, and God's the one bringing people in. There's a verse in Acts 17:26 where it says, from one person God made every nation of people that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he determines the time set for them and the exact places where they should live. Well, to put that in the Phillips translation for guys who miss it in King James, it's like when the house next door's Remax sign sold on it, and a yellow cab pulls up, and some Sikh guys comes out, that's it. A lot of people had a real problem with different kinds of people coming to like our Canada and miss the whole point of what's going on. And so if you start to get to know Jesus and spend time with him, just like when he walked among the Jewish people, he would see the hand of God in people there, like a Roman centurion who had no business being in their country, right? Imagine he's a dominating power even there. And Jesus said to the centurion, I've not seen such great faith in all of Israel. And so not only is God bringing people like Muslims and those in, but we would always pray for the harvest, that we reach these people. You know what we've discovered connecting streams? Well, we're slow to get it. So one of the brown guys told us. He said, you realize God's not only bringing you the harvest, but the harvesters? And some of our most fruitful volunteers and leaders are newcomers to Canada. So many stories could tell you about them. I don't know, how much time do I have? Okay. So Jesus said, I was a stranger and you invited me in. So when you stand before Christ, you know Matthew 25, the sheep and the goats, and he separates, he's not going to say, hey, let me see your doctrinal statement. Ooh, good, you got that point. He's going to say things like, I was a stranger and you invited me in. And you're going to say, what, Lord? When did I see you? That was you? Or, oh no, right? Miss that. So when did we see him? So I think of Jesus 2,000 years ago. I think of these Jewish people who are begging and crying out, God, send us the Messiah. Oh, God, come to us. And some of them probably bumped right into him. Right? Just walked right by him. They missed it. And we're those people today. We are praying, where's Jesus? I want to experience him in my life. He's here. You can meet him. Okay, to help you get started, there's a good book our leader gave us, real thin, Extreme Prayer. So you can start with that. I'll leave it where you can see that. And there's another one. I have 25 copies. I'm down on my last one. It's called Stranger God, Meeting Jesus in Disguise. Jesus said, I was a stranger and you invited me in. And sometimes when you're there with a Muslim, Sikh, Hindu, whatever kind of person, guess who you bump into? Christ there. You'll actually experience his presence in these people. People like Danny from Syria. He looks like one of the guys, right, that people might be scared of. Most loving guy. My wife loves this guy. He's become a son to us. I took Danny kayaking for the first time. He'd just come from a war zone, so he paddled his kayak in the middle of the lake and just sat there for an hour with a big smile. Danny used to blast Pink Floyd in the office because all the other guys had run away. I said, Danny, when did you leave? He showed me a YouTube video. Tank came up the street. I thought it must be one of theirs. Boom. Took out the snipers above him. It was time to leave. Danny's dad, such a nice guy. This little guy comes from Syria with his 2 suitcases. He could bring so little. Guess what he brings? A great big hookah pipe for me in one of them. Well, what a sacrifice. Oh my goodness. Okay, I got so many, like Alan and Mary. They're Muslims in Iran. They become just the sweetest, kindest, nicest people you could ever meet. They've now started a thing called Conversation Cafe. If you want to learn how to do one, we can help you. It's very easy. Brahm from Iraq. What? 10 seconds? Okay, we're wrapping her up. I could go on and on and on, but I won't. So if you want to encounter Christ, he's here. He's in those strangers that you might be a little bit scared of. Man, just take the time. We can help you start with prayer. And as you can tell, life has become so joyful. 40 years being Christian, I thank God I got to live to be 63 because I'm just getting it.
Hi, my name's Margaret, and this is Bruce Walker, and Bruce and I are going to be talking to you about opportunities, so Bruce is going to start.
a little taller than everybody else. I'm Bruce. My girlfriend over here, Tiffany, she's my only groupie. She's faithfully recording all my messages. Anyway, we're going to talk about prayer and people and partners and things like that, opportunities. When you surrender to the cause of the gospel, which is the power according to the scriptures, the power of God, and your eyes are opened to seeing the many people around you that need to be saved, if you take this on yourself, you will be overwhelmed. You were never meant to carry this. You have to go to God with it. It's His mission and His plan. When I started as a chaplain at the Edmonton Remand Center, I saw the great need for the gospel to go in there. And then I saw the few resources that I had to use, and I began to pray. I prayed that God would supply willing souls covered with the blood of Christ to reach people with the gospel. What happened was amazing. Believers from various backgrounds would call me and ask the same thing. How can I come in to the Edmonton Remand Center and spread the gospel? They would tell me things like they had a dream, or they had a desire that they should go into the Edmonton Remand Center and teach people about Jesus. This was truly an answer to prayer. I had so many people contacting me, I had to return to my knees and ask God for the ability to organize and train them. By God's grace, I got inspired to design and implement training sessions. Rhonda was a part of one of them, to introduce volunteers to the prison culture. And with the help of Connecting Streams, I was able to divide everybody into teams where the lesser experienced could learn from the more experienced, with the goal of training more leaders. The goal was to have kind of an apprenticeship type system that keeps on multiplying. When I started at the Edmonton Remand Center, I only had 7 evangelical volunteers. Not very organized, coming in here and there. When I left there this summer, I had more than 50 volunteers that were highly effective and organized, with the ability to multiply their groups. The Edmonton Remand Center is the largest prison in Canada. And one of the visions that God gave me is that there were 28 separate units, and each unit would have either a church service or Bible study going in there weekly, presenting the gospel clearly. When I left there this past summer, that was happening to about half of the institution. I recently learned that that's been bumped up to about 3/4 of the institution now. Because all of that was introduced, that God had me build there, it's all multiplying with the help of Connecting Streams. Now that I am doing ministry in the inner city, the same thing is happening. By God's grace, I have made contact with various organizations, and through prayer, I have formed a team of 6 people and introduced training sessions to improve effectiveness and multiplication. We are now going into homeless shelters, addiction rehab centers, routinely in downtown Edmonton, presenting the gospel. Being open to what God is doing and not trying to force your idea is key. God is sovereign. He is preparing a workforce, and it's His plan. Surrendering yourself to God is necessary to being successful in ministry.
So I'm going to talk to you about partners now. We're going to talk about ministry partners to start. As Donna said, it's pretty daunting and scary to start something on your own, but there's security in going in numbers. So in Connecting Streams, we really believe in teams, as Donna has said. So teams are great because 2 are better than 1. In teams, there's support and community. You learn from each other, you're accountable to each other, and you pray together. So through Connecting Streams, you could actually join an existing team if you're in the Edmonton or Ottawa area or soon in Calgary. So we've got lots of teams on the ground already in those places, or the Lord might use you to birth a new team. And if you live outside of the areas where we have staff, you can still be part of a team through our linked coaching model, which I'll talk about more in a few minutes. So if you're thinking of starting a ministry team on your own, I'd encourage you to think and pray about going with others rather than going on your own, and ask the Lord to show you who you know that you could ask. Next, I'm going to talk about facility partners, because you need a place to go to minister. So where is the Lord calling you? As we mentioned, we have teams in lots of different places, in different streams of ministry, and we have framework in place. So we could help you think through where you'd like to go and help you make a connection. I want to tell you about Al. For months, Al would drive past a certain facility in Fort Saskatchewan, a town he lived in, and he always felt he should get in there to volunteer. But when he contacted the facility on his own, they didn't let him go in. But then he was disappointed. A little later at his church, somebody told him that Connecting Streams actually has teams in that facility. So he contacted Connecting Streams, he completed our process, and now he goes to that facility, and several years later, he goes every week and actually now leads a team. So if the Lord's calling you to a specific place, we might actually have a connection there, or we can help you make a connection. And so I just encourage you to ask the Lord to show you, and we can actually help you talk through that to help you find your right fit. As far as the practical aspect of when you're starting in ministry, there's a few things you might want to think through. And we've helped to launch many new teams and actually helped hundreds of volunteers to get started. And we could provide help and guidance in any of these areas. So if you decide to start ministry apart from Connecting Streams, which is a great thing too, these are still things you might want to consider. So the first thing a volunteer does, I gotta put this down, Bruce, you're way too tall. Okay. The first thing a volunteer does is they go through our application process. So we have an online application form on our website, and the information's in your notes there. And so that includes a statement of faith and some other things. And then every volunteer has an interview with a Connecting Stream staff member, and we help you find the right fit. And then there's police check and security clearance. Because almost every place requires a police check these days, we can provide a letter, you can get one done at no charge or almost no charge, depending where you live. And then we'll help you with the security clearance process at the facility, because every facility has their own clearance process. And then a ministry plan. What will you do once you get started? We can help you, because we've got some tested methods that we can suggest. And finally, training and resources. Connecting Streams believes in ongoing training and equipping for our volunteers. We feel like it's important not only to help you get started, but to support you in the long term as well. So we want to help volunteers learn and grow and reach their full potential. Bruce has something more to say.
All right, so the plan. Allow yourself to have a plan and move towards it. You can't steer a parked car. But be willing to change your plan as the situations change. It is most important to know that you are trying to understand God's plan and apply it. If you get too locked into one idea and not open to see when things are changing, you can lose it. Allow the plan to develop. Let it be a living document, open to change. Let your own personal goals be your servants and not your masters. As we draw closer to God, He doesn't become like us. We become like Him. This is also related to our goals and our plans. Think of yourself as being in a boat, in the sea, and you have a rope tied to the land. When you start to pull the rope, you aren't pulling the land towards you. You are moving towards the land. So when you start making your plans, You're going to have to adjust it as God brings new revelation of the situation you're in. My final point, it's important that we live in the vision that God has given you. You are walking the road of faith. That's when you will see the vision develop in amazing ways right before your eyes. And if you are looking for opportunities right now, like I said, I'm in the inner city, and there are opportunities to join my team in there, and also Oak Hill Boys Ranch, working with troubled youth. So think about that.
Thanks, Bruce. So, as I mentioned, and Bruce is here in Edmonton, so we do have Connecting Stream staff in Edmonton, Ottawa, and just starting in Calgary. But you're probably thinking to yourself, well, that's all great, but I don't live in those areas, so how can I get involved with Connecting Streams if I feel like that's something I want to do? So we have something in place. We have the Connecting Streams Link coaching model, which I mentioned a few minutes ago, and it can help you get started in ministry in your own community, no matter where you live. So we launched this model in 2018 to help volunteers in any location go and serve societies marginalized in their own community. So Link teams are like any Connecting Streams team. They're groups of people who go weekly to do ministry together in a certain venue, to share the gospel with people and to build relationships. The difference with Link teams is that Link leaders are supported and trained remotely by Connecting Stream staff. So since we don't have staff in your area, through the wonders of technology, we can still coach you remotely through online video calls, phone calls, emails, and shared resources. And that coaching is tailor-made for every leader. We don't follow a set formula. We customize it to each leader. So we'll help you make a connection with the place you want to serve. We'll help you with the clearance process and provide ongoing coaching, resources, and training. It does take somebody with initiative and to start a new team, but we'll help you talk through finding volunteers to join you, and then we'll screen and process those volunteers and help train them too. So as staff, we want to help you get started and also support you over the long term. So how does it work? Well, let's say you feel called to be part of what God's doing through Connecting Streams, and there isn't currently Connecting Streams staff in your community. You might want to consider this Link coaching model. So maybe God's calling you to be the one to start something new, to step out and be the first one. So you would contact our Link coordinator, which happens to be me. And you use the contact information in your notes. And then I'll connect it with you, and we'll talk about maybe what you want to do. And if it's a good fit, then we'll take the next steps. I'll coach you through those next steps, including helping, well, you need to gather a team of volunteers, but I'll help you. I'll talk you through that. And I'll help you gain access to an area of ministry, and then I'll coach you in what to do once you get there. I want to tell you about Tim. So a couple of years ago, Tim actually became a Connecting Streams volunteer here in Edmonton and joined a team at the Edmonton Remand Center. But shortly after he started, his wife got a new job in Iqaluit, Nunavut, and Tim relocated with her up north. So he still felt called to prison ministry, and one day he called me and he said, Margaret, I wish there was Connecting Streams in Iqaluit. Well, since we just launched this Link program, I was so delighted to say, Tim, there can be Connecting Streams in Iqaluit. You can be Connecting Streams. So actually, he and his wife became some of our first formal Link volunteers. And we made an introduction for them at the prison. We provided whatever the facility needed and Tim and his wife needed, and then they were given permission to go in. And actually it took a long time, but last Sunday was the very first Sunday that they went into that facility to minister, and they had 12 men attend, which was amazing. And the next day, just as a confirmation from God, a guard sent Tim a text which said, never had there ever been that many men attend a Bible study ever in that facility. And he said, keep up the good work, brother. So that was like, wow, so awesome. Yeah. So Tim and I talk every 2 to 4 weeks. We have that coaching relationship, and we're praying together for more volunteers to join them. So why would you join, why would you go through the Connecting Streams link model instead of going on your own? Which you can go on your own, but there are some advantages. First of all, prayer support. Connecting Streams has prayer partners in place who will support you and your team with ongoing prayer. An association with an established organization like Connecting Streams can bring credibility to your team with some facilities. You'll gain from Connecting Streams experience and resources and our ongoing training. And of course, there's a team leader coaching, which as I said, is customized for you and your community and your team, because every leader is unique. And we'll connect with you every 2 to 4 weeks to talk through things. And so through this ongoing coaching, you can benefit from having a sounding board, someone to talk to. You'll have accountability, and we'll provide encouragement and insight and prayer support and load sharing when the need arises to navigate problems. So if you feel called to be part of what God's doing through Connecting Streams, and there isn't Connecting Streams staff in your area, you might want to consider the LINK program. And like Tim, God might be calling you to go first, and then others will follow. It only takes one person to go first, to take God's love to the lost and lonely people in our world. Thanks.